All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for Storybook Reading with your young child with ASD. This webinar is specifically geared towards young learners, either toddlers or young children who are pre-literacy level, and as well as the children who are beginning to read or beginning to show interest in literacy. This is an area that is of huge interest to me, so I hope to share with you this morning some ideas and some strategies. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box. If I am able to, I will answer the question while I am talking. If not, I will save some time towards the end to answer the question. So today we're going to talk about how literacy is learned. We're going to talk about the importance of reading to and with our children. We're going to determine what we should read with our children and how, in terms of strategies, you can use to be successful while reading stories with your child. And I will also share some app resources with you. So this is the emergent view of literacy. It's a model that shows really how literacy is learned. And literacy really involves all of these areas of skills. We cannot learn any of these areas without the other. So we really can't learn to read unless we're learning how to speak, listen, and write all at the same time. All of these areas are dependent upon the other. In order to learn how to write, we need to be learning how to read, and we need to be learning how to communicate, whether it's through verbal speech or through augmentative communication. And we also need to learn how to listen. And all of these are intertwined and take place at once. They cannot be learned in isolation. There are many, many benefits of reading with your child. When we read to our child, they learn the sound of language. They need to be exposed to hearing many different sounds, many different words. They need to learn the sound of the rhythm of our language when we read. Children learn the pleasure of sharing books with other people. Literacy is learned in a social context, and so finding pleasure when reading with other people takes place when we do it together. It promotes the pleasure and the enjoyment in reading. Our children learn new words when they read with us, and they have opportunities to establish comprehension. The more we expose our children to these new words, and these words being used in context, we can establish more comprehension. Our children explore the words that they already know, maybe sometimes even in a new way. So a word might be used one way in their own personal lives, but when they see it in a book, it might be used differently. And that promotes generalization of their vocabulary. Our students can also explore their imagination. It's important for our children to be exposed to many different ideas and many different concepts, and all of this establishes imagination, and that's important for our children because it expands their vocabulary and expands their background knowledge. When we read with our children, they also discover new ways to communicate. And this is so important because print is very powerful for our children. Print is a skill that provides our kids with power to express their ideas. And we have that power. We communicate through print every day, all day long, and we need to give our kids that power. Print is not just a skill that we use in school. Print is learning how to manipulate print through reading and writing and speaking and listening. We use that throughout our day to make connections with other people, to be independent, and it's a very powerful skill, and we need to give that to our kids. And also, very importantly, reading with our children teaches our child to learn to learn. And when we start doing that at such a young age, reading with our kids establishes a foundation. It gets them ready to learn in the later years. So as you can see, reading has many, many benefits. And it's not, it's a benefit not only for the individual child, as you can see the list of benefits, but it's also a benefit for the dyad, the parent and child who are participating in this literacy activity. It's something that can be done together and has so many benefits. When we read with our child, what do we want our child to learn? Well, there are many concepts of print that are so important and we take for granted that our child will learn. We want our child to learn how to hold the book in the right position, not upside down. We don't open a book from the back cover. We open it from the front cover. And this is a concept of print that is necessary to learn. We want to teach them how to open and close the book the right way. We want to teach them to turn the pages and to use the book appropriately. If there are flaps or things to lift in the book, buttons to press, we want to encourage our child. I'm sorry, I just changed the slide by accident. We want to encourage our child to engage with the book. We don't want them to just ignore those things. We want them to participate. We want our child to learn to look at the pictures. The pictures are so important because it helps establish comprehension. It's not enough to just read words. Our children need to learn how to get information from the pictures that are on the page. We want our child to learn that there's a connection between the pictures and the real things around them, that pictures represent things in their lives. We want our child to learn to love reading so that they spend more and more time looking at books. Books are filled with valuable information, and we want our kids to enjoy it and spend more time doing it. We want our child to learn to point to pictures, label them, and eventually there are more advanced skills that we want our child to do. We want our child to participate enough so that they can repeat what they just read. So when we read something, they might look up at us and repeat the line that they just read. We want our children to be able to answer questions about the text that they just read. Not only simple yes/no questions, but we want them to be able to answer WH questions and make inferences eventually about what they are reading. We want them to be able to fill in the blanks. So if we say to our child, the boy went to the, and we want them to fill in the word party, which demonstrates comprehension. We want the child to be able to look at you and then back at the book, social referencing, social engagement, because we do know that literacy is learned in a social context. And this is a great activity to establish engagement between you and your child. We also want our child to enjoy the activity enough to ask for books that they want to read. And we know that children do have favorite books, and they will ask you to read a specific book repeatedly. And that's okay. That's what typical children do. And we need to give our children with autism the same opportunity to ask for books that they want. So where do we start? The first thing is we need to read and read and read and read. We need to really, really expose our children to the world of literacy. And that means we need to immerse them in it. If you go into a typical preschool classroom, even if it's a classroom for 2-year-olds, this type of classroom is filled with literacy opportunities. 2-year-old children are immersed in reading and writing and communicating and listening all throughout their school day. There's a writing center, a library center, a housekeeping center, all these centers where they're writing things to each other, even 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds write by stamping or making a mark across a paper, painting. This is still literacy development, and they need to have those experiences to get them ready for the next experience, which is, the more academic literacy experiences. So even with our young children, we need to immerse them. And to begin with, you need to read and read and read all the time. I have one statistic that talks about a student who reads for 20 minutes a night with a parent for 5 nights every week, and another student who reads only for 4 minutes a night for 5 nights a week, or maybe even not at all. Well, the first student who read 20 minutes for 5 nights a week, by the time they've reached the end of 6th grade, they will have been reading for 60 whole school days. I mean, that's a lot. To read consistently, continuously for 60 days, that's a lot of literacy exposure. Whereas the student who maybe only was read to for 4 minutes, or maybe not even at all, they got the equivalent of only 12 school days filled with literacy exposure. That's a huge difference. And you can bet that the student who read for 20 minutes a day, whether they read by themselves or they were read to, they have so many more tools and such a better foundation for future literacy experiences. The comprehension, the vocabulary, even the communication skills are going to be so much more developed. Our children with autism, in their early years, we focus on other very important skills like toilet training and teaching our kids to sit, and they're getting therapies. But we can't forget this literacy component. And even if it's only 10 minutes a day where you're looking at pictures in a book, you don't even have to read, but even if it's only looking through pictures, that's still literacy exposure. So I'm telling you to read, and what do you read? So you want to choose books that are interesting and clear, pictures that are good for pointing to and naming things. You want to choose books where the pictures are, the main idea of the picture matches the text, so that the main idea is easy to pick out of the picture. It's very motivating for books to be interactive for our young readers, with flaps and buttons, and we don't want all our books to be like that, but it's a lot of fun and very motivating for our kids when their books are interactive. We also want the text and the storyline to be predictable. So if you think about early childhood books, like Brown Bear, Brown Bear, that text is very repetitive. Brown bear, what do you see? I see a bluebird looking at me. I think that's the animal that comes after the brown bear. But every page has the same sequence of text, and that's really important for language development and literacy development. Our kids are able to participate when they know what's coming next. They're able to establish their comprehension when they can predict what's coming next. We want the story to be simple and the language to be simple at the beginning. We want the story to have a beginning and a middle and an end. We also want to choose books that our kids can make connections to, so that they can use what they already know to establish additional comprehension. For example, if you're going to read a storybook that has snow, that talks about snow, Our children in South Florida, most of them have never seen snow. So it's okay to still read the book, but you may want to show them, you know, shaved ice or ice cubes and explain cold and this snow is cold, so that they can have a little bit of background knowledge before they are reading this book with you, so that they understand more. Another great thing to read with children are family photos, family albums. And those albums may not have words, you may not have written anything, but it's still a book. You can still tell a story, you can still communicate with those pictures, even if you're just labeling people. It's a great first book, beginning book to read with our kids. And how motivating is it for children to be looking at photos of people that they love and they know well? Another idea is to create books just for your child, based on their interest and based on their experiences. And this is my favorite idea for beginning books for kids, and it's something that I've done with my own kids. You can use PowerPoint to create books for your child. And throughout my kids' young childhood, I created books of things that we did, whether it was, you know, just like a day trip or a weekend trip. And they loved to read these books after our trips. We read it so many times that they would then fill in the blanks. They had background knowledge because they were there, so they remember the things that they're seeing in these books. It's very motivating to read about yourself. And you can build so much language when talking about these experiences. So this is an example of a book that I made for my oldest son after we went to Disney World when he was young, and that's a little friend of his. So our trip to Disney World. I went to Disney World with Benji and my friend Adam. We had so much fun. And you can see I'm using very simple text. We saw many different characters in Disney World. We saw Goofy. We saw Mickey Mouse. So I'm using the same predictable structure for each page. We had so much fun in Disney World. Let's go back again soon. So prior to this last page, I had many different pages where I wrote, we saw, and then the character and a picture of that character. My son loved reading this book over and over again. We made books about the circus, a birthday party, so many different things. And not only were these books our reading material, but they also became family photo albums. What great memories for you. These are some apps that you can have on an iPad, an iTouch, an iPhone. Some of these do exist in Android tablets and phones, but not all of them. I'll leave this up for a second so that you can quickly jot down some of these apps, but you can make your own books on a tablet. Some of these you can print, so you can have it on a tablet as well as have a hard copy of the book. And some of these you can only access digitally on your tablet. Keynote, the first app, is the Apple version of PowerPoint. So you have Keynote on a Mac computer as well as your iPad or your iTouch iPhone. And you can do some really neat stuff with these apps. So I'll leave it on for one more second so you can quickly jot down the names of these apps. And my email address is on one of the last slides of this webinar. So if you would like a copy of this handout, please just email me and I'll send you the handout along with a list of all these apps. I'll leave it on for one more second. So a little bit more about choosing the right books to read with your young child. You want to choose books that have good rhythm, good rhyme. This all promotes language development. Repetition, alliteration. Alliteration is when all the words start with the same letter. So the lazy lion lay lounging, that's alliteration. Again, language development, being aware of the sounds of language. You also want the book to be interesting to the child. It's also great for beginning readers and young readers to have only a few pages, a few words per page, so it's not overwhelming. For our young kids, it helps when the book is short, and it also helps when the book is easy to manipulate. Some of our children have challenges with their fine motor skills. If they can't turn a page, they're not going to be able to participate in a reading activity. So there are different modifications that you can make to a book so that a child can easily turn a page. And if any of you have questions about that, you can contact me. But there is something called a page fluffer. And page fluffers can be added to a book on the side of the page so that a child can easily turn the page. Also, when you read with your child, you want to become an entertainer. You want to be really animated and expressive, very emphatic. You want to exaggerate keywords. Point to the pictures and the words. I would encourage you to do that. And also using props when you're reading helps a lot to engage the child so that, even if you have a puppet or a stuffed animal or even pictures, you can hold it, they can hold it. A puppet can interact with a child and engage them and pull them into the reading activity. One thing I do want to mention is the books that you choose. I would not encourage using those beginner books that I just showed you, like these books, with beginning readers who are older students. We always want to make sure that the material is age appropriate. So we don't want a beginning 10-year-old reader to be reading Brown Bear, Brown Bear. We can write our own book with developmental age-appropriate material that is at a lower reading level. And it does exist out there. You can find it. There is material available commercially. But, I just want to put that out there that you shouldn't read these young toddler books with older readers who are beginners. So just one more thing about being really emphatic and interactive with your child when you read. You have to make print talk. It's not enough to expose your child to the printed word. You have to encourage your child to notice the print that is around him and show him the value of what is written. So if your child communicates that he wants a favorite type of cookie and you have no more of that cookie in your home, say to your child, "We have no more. Let's write it on our shopping list," and model for your child. Take a piece of paper and write cookie for your child. Model the use of that language, of that print, to show them that print can talk to them, to you. You can show them how you're going to write an email to someone, how you're going to write a thank you note to someone. You have to demonstrate the power of print. So sometimes we have to use some special strategies with our kids to really engage them and get them participating more. For one, because literacy is learned in a social context and it's not isolated, you want to try to be face-to-face with them. In this little picture on this slide, they're looking at each other, but sometimes our child with autism may not look at us when we're reading, and so it helps when you're facing them, when you sit opposite them, so you can look at each other. One strategy out of the Hanen Center up in Canada is the observe, wait, and listen strategy. And that's basically what it says. When you're reading with your child, You want to observe your child, how interested they are, how engaged they are, what's interesting them. You want to wait. You want to give them some wait time to process. And you want to listen to what they're saying. Listen very carefully to the words that they're using. Listen to their body language. Listen to what they're interested in. And then communicate and point out certain things based on what you are observing during that time and listening to. Sometimes we have to simplify and shorten the text in a book. Sometimes our kids can't get through a whole paragraph on a page. So you may want to paraphrase and just say one line per page. You can pretend you're reading the text while looking at the picture and just tell the story. You also want to help make personal connections and remind your child about something that they've experienced that connects them to the text that you're reading to them. Sometimes we use visual supports to engage our children. So sometimes when I am teaching a parent to read a book to their child, we will make a visual for each page, a picture symbol for each page that shows the main idea of the page. We don't give symbols for each word on that page. We just choose the main idea. And then the child can hold that picture, and when the parent reads that page in the book, the child can attach that picture onto that storybook page using a paperclip or Velcro. It helps the child connect, it helps the child participate, and it helps promote comprehension. We also sometimes need to follow our child's lead behaviorally. Sometimes our child cannot sit even for 2 minutes to read a beginning book. So sometimes I teach a parent this strategy to have the child sit on their lap. You say, let's say they're reading Brown Bear, Brown Bear. Brown Bear, Brown Bear, what do you see? So the parent says the title quickly. They turn to the first page and they'll label the first animal, Brown Bear. And they'll turn to the end of the book and they'll label something on the last page. They'll close the book and say, all right, we finished the book. Go take a break. The child will take a very short break and the parent will bring their child back. They'll do that procedure repeatedly, but adding pages when they can. So for the first few times, they still might do the cover, the first page, the last page, and then they're finished. They might do that for a few times, and then maybe on the 10th time, they'll add in a page in the middle. So they'll do the cover, the first page, they'll label an animal in the middle of the book, the last page, they're all done. Slowly but surely, the parent will add pages. So maybe by the end of the week, the parent will be labeling animals on 6 pages of the book. In a few weeks, the child will be able to sit for the entire book. Sometimes that process takes 5 minutes for the child to learn that they will get a break and they'll participate for longer during the reading. Sometimes it will take weeks to teach the child that if they sit through the pages, they will then get to take their break. But the point is the parent is slowly increasing the number of pages of the book that the child needs to sit for. So you're teaching the child to sit to learn. So sometimes we need to break down that process and teach it in a more systematic way. We need to teach our kids the skill of literacy enjoyment. Sometimes our kids don't enjoy it at first. Like I just told you, sometimes we have to systematically teach them to sit through that process. Eventually, they will enjoy it more, and we need to be sure that we're involving enjoyment in the activity. Sometimes also, we need to use a token system. A token system is where we are delivering a token in the form of, let's say, a penny or a sticker, something on Velcro. When the child gets all of their required tokens, they get a break or a reinforcer. So sometimes we'll have a strip with, let's say, 10 spots of Velcro or 5 spots of Velcro. With each page that is read, we'll deliver a token. And the child can see how many more pieces of Velcro have to be covered before they get their break or their reinforcer. When the child earns the 5 tokens or the 10 tokens, they get to go and take their break, get their reinforcer. This strategy is not needed forever because the pleasure of literacy is eventually learned, and it becomes more inherently reinforcing. But to teach that process, sometimes a token system is required. If anyone has questions about using a token system, please feel free to contact me and I can give you that information. This is another strategy out of the Hanen Center. Say less, stress, go slow, and show. So when you read books with your child, you want to say less. You want to keep your language very concise and simple. You want to stress, repeat and exaggerate specific words related to the main idea of the book or the page. You want to go slowly. Read slowly so that your child can process, but not too slowly because you don't want to lose their engagement. And you want to show them, just like we were just talking about. You want to use gestures, be really emphatic, act out things from the book, use props and objects to engage them. The Hanen Early Language Programs has come up with a checklist, and I chose some of the items on their checklist to go through with you, things that we need to think about. If you're going to, let's say, grade yourself on how you're doing with book reading with your child. So one thing to ask yourself is, how often do I read to my child? And we know, research has shown that children who are read to frequently become better readers. They are exposed to skills that are just absolutely crucial for literacy development. And even if you have to start off with 60 seconds of reading a book every night for now, eventually that will grow. Another question is, do you read the same books repeatedly on different days? So I know my children ask me to read the same books over and over and over again. And this is how typical children become more involved in literacy experiences. When we read the same book repeatedly, our child has the opportunity to engage with language, to think more deeply about that story, and to practice the use of new words. Our kids love repetition. And so one question that always people ask is, well, my child is, really stuck on a book, and they insist on the same book all the time. And my response is, well, that's okay. For some of our kids with autism, they do get a little more stuck than we hope for. But we need to still allow them that repetition. But I would then use that book as a reinforcer. So they still have access to that repeated exposure, but yet you say to them, I know you want to read that book again. I can't wait to read that book with you again. First, we're going to read this book about Valentine's Day, and then we can read your book again. So that they're still getting what they want, and you're kind of sliding in a new experience there. Here are some more questions. Do you ask questions that encourage your child to think about the story? Why? What do you think about? Do you make connections between the story and your own personal lives? And do you ask your child to make predictions? So like when you look at the cover of a book, say to your child, what do you think this book is about? Look at this picture. Now this might be a very difficult skill for some of our kids, but we still need to start asking these questions to expose them and to get them ready for when they're a little bit older and they can answer the questions. In order to establish comprehension skills, children need to experience that inferencing, that reading in between the lines. And we need to give our children multiple opportunities to think about what they're reading and making connections between the story and their own lives. This is how comprehension develops. It might be a very difficult skill for them, like I just mentioned, but our kids can do it. They just need more exposure than typical children. Do you point out concepts of print? Track words with your finger, point to uppercase and lowercase letters and punctuation, emphasize specific letter sounds, draw attention to rhyming words, and demonstrate the left to right sweep of the text as you read. These are all things that even if you go into a classroom for 2-year-olds, you will see the teacher pointing out. Are 2-year-olds totally ready to understand what an exclamation mark is? No. But they will be pointed, the exclamation mark will be pointed out to them 100 times before they're really expected to know that skill. They need that exposure. So that when you're reading with your child and you see that exclamation mark, you say to them, oh, there's an exclamation mark. That means we have to yell that sentence. Yell it with me. It starts to get them ready, and it helps them develop the concepts of print. In order to become a reader, children need to learn these concepts. It will get them ready to establish a foundation upon which comprehension skills can be built. So the last thing we need to talk about is digital books, because a lot of us have tablets of some kind, whether it's a Kindle or an iPad or some other type of Android tablet, and we're looking at books on our tablets. And there are good things and bad things about these digital books. So it would be unfair for me to talk about reading with our young children and not mention this. Digital books may be interactive. Some of them are interactive, where you would press a button and something would happen. Some of them are not. Some of them are just plain old books. Some of these digital books have embedded music, sound effects, games, videos. They can be very motivating, but at the same time, they can also be very distracting. So you have to be very thoughtful about the book that you're choosing and how it's going to work for your child, what you want it to do for your child. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. I would advise that it's important to expose our kids to both digital and print books. I think that our kids need to experience the books on the tablets as well as a real book where they're turning pages. They need to do both. Research has shown that digital books tend to promote discussion amongst the readers related to the digital features rather than the content of the book. And that's okay if that's what, for that particular book, you have decided is going to be the priority. So the recommendation is, if you would like to just have it be a fun, different experience, and you're okay with a non-content discussion, then it's okay, because there is motivation in a fun ebook. If you really want to focus on the content, the storyline, the details of the print, then you should really choose a print book. Again, our kids need to be exposed to both in this day and age. Also, research has shown that story recall is not as strong when reading digital books. And that's really because the focus is on all these other things, the fun parts, aside, and not the content. These are some qualities that you can look for when you look at ebooks and you say to yourself, is this a quality digital book? Quality digital books have narration when it reads to you that really models some nice fluency. And fluency is the flow of the words. If you read like this, that is not good fluency. So you want the fluency to model some really nice flow, to model for our kids how we read. if there is a very choppy fluency, it affects comprehension. Sometimes in digital books, text can be highlighted as the child reads. We don't want this forever, but it's a nice feature to stimulate that left to right flow of reading. It really is a nice model for our kids. Sometimes you can point to a word and you can get a definition of an unfamiliar vocabulary word. That's a nice feature of a digital book. You might not find that as much in our early reader books, but for the older kids, you would find that. Quality digital books also allows for the parent and child to interact around the content and not be as distracted by the digital features, those embedded features in the book. You also want the book to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, it's going to be very distracting. And then you also have to consider the literary worthiness. Think about the classic books that we know. Our kids need to be exposed to that, classic literature. And there are a lot of digital books out there that are written about the kids' movies that they're watching. That really, the literature is just not quality literature. So you have to think about what you're choosing. Here are two resources where you can go to get information about digital books. And they make some nice recommendations as to which digital books are, quality digital books. I'll leave this up for a second so that you can copy that down. And again, if you want the handout, just let me know. I'll leave it up for one more second. So this is, the next couple of slides have examples of storybook apps. And these are like the classics. This is good literature. And I recommend these. The Penguin Leveled readers, there's a plethora of early childhood readers with good language, repetitive language, predictable text, pictures that really demonstrate the main idea. And then these are some other classics. This is good literature. Jack and the Beanstalk, Little Red Hen, Little Red Riding Hood. Just copy down these names. So these are published by McGraw-Hill. There are other digital books in the App Store with the same titles, but McGraw-Hill really focuses on that good classic literature. Here are some other ones. Reading Rainbow has a plethora of books included in this library, and it's free. There might be some in-app purchases, but there are a lot that are free, just given to you when you get the free app. I Like Stories, Read with Biff, Chip, and Kipper. There are a whole bunch of Biff, Chip, and Kipper books. Again, it's a plethora, like a collection of books. Great material. Super Readers is another one. And Epic is another one. Epic is free for teachers. So if you go to the Epic website, you can sign up as a teacher and be able to access books for free. Epic Books, Epic prides itself on not being distracting and really focusing on that classic literature without the buttons and the music and the embedded videos. So that is it. This is my contact information. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or if you would like handouts. I'm going to stop recording this webinar and open up the chat box for discussion if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask.